Hello and welcome to the first episode of The Preview, a new show from Fulhamish, looking forward to our weekend games. My name's Elizabeth Barnard and I'm your host for today. And today we're looking forward to a tricky trip to St James's Park. It's not somewhere we've had the best record recently, but we're hoping that we can turn it around this weekend. And I'm delighted to say that I'm joined today by Andrew Musgrove. Welcome to Fulhamish, Andrew.
Thank you very much for having me. How are you keeping? You well?
Yeah, I'm great. Thank you. And you?
Yes. Looking forward to Saturday and a return to St James's Park. So, yeah, I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Yeah. Firstly, I'd love to take a little zoomed out look at your season so far. Obviously, I can see so much from the outside, but I'm not a Newcastle fan. So how has it felt 24-25 being a Newcastle fan?
It's been a little bit up and down. It was a little bit of a slow start. They were picking up points, but they weren't playing particularly well. And then all of a sudden, the performances matched the points total. And at one point, Eddie Howe was under some deserved pressure, but he's turned it around. I don't think anyone really was calling for him to go. I certainly wasn't. But we were rightfully critiquing what he was doing, but always had faith he would start to get the results. And they went on this amazing 9-game victory run, only to be brought down to earth with a bit of a bang by Bournemouth a couple of weeks back. But I think in those 9 games in which Newcastle won, we really got to see Newcastle at their best. Defensively solid, and then the individual performances of some attacking stars that we've got, the likes of Anthony Gordon, Sandro Tonali, and that number 6, which has probably been the key reason Newcastle have suddenly picked up pace, and Alexander Isak breaking records with ease. And I think, minus the Bournemouth result, we've kind of had this. We're now having the season we probably expected to have at the start of the season, going for Champions League football, a good cup run, and fingers crossed we can continue the good form we've been in.
Yeah, so you're coming into this game, aren't you, in quite good form? Obviously, the Bournemouth result aside, but no shame to lose to Bournemouth at the moment. They've had some real giant killings this season, I think. Are there any injuries or squad issues that Fulham should know about? Anything that we should expect? Or should we expect more of the same from recent wins?
I think it'll be an unchanged side. The only real question is whether Eddie Howe brings Nick Pope back in for Martin Dubravka. But Martin Dubravka has been absolutely brilliant, and Eddie Howe has really fought to keep him at the club this month because he had an offer from a Saudi team, to go into the sunset and get that last big paycheck. And I think he wanted to go, but Eddie Howe has made it clear that he wants him to stay, and it looks like he is going to stay. And he's been brilliant since he's came in. I think everyone was a little bit worried when Nick Pope picked up a knee injury, and because last season when it happened and Martin Dubravka came in, and to be fair to Martin, he was particularly poor, but he's come in this time around and he's been absolutely brilliant. Newcastle look fantastic. Defensively, they look assured when the ball goes back to him, and that's probably the key difference between him and Nick Pope. So that would be the big decision Eddie Howe has to make, but he's hinted that he's not going to change players just because the so-called first choice return. We've seen it with Dan Burn and Sven Botman. Botman's not got his place back in the side. Burns kept his place because he's been playing so well, and the same will happen with Martin Dubravka, and the rest of the team will remain. And that's probably maybe the biggest concern, is that I don't think Eddie Howe has the depth and quality to change it. It's a big week for Newcastle with the League Cup semi-final coming, and then ideally you might want to rest one or two of your stars, but you can only do that if you've got players of equal ability, and he hasn't got that at the moment. So that's probably the biggest concern. And against Bournemouth, they were very fatigued. Is that something that Fulham could maybe tap into? I hope not, but I think that's maybe something that Marco Silva will be hoping is the case once again for Newcastle, that tiredness hits them, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you actually about that second leg of the Carabao Cup semi-finals. Fulham were in the Carabao Cup semi-finals last year, and I remember in our fan base it being a much bigger deal than the league at that point. Is that how you're feeling? I assume you won't expect to see any rotation, but do you feel like players and the manager might have one eye on that game midweek?
I don't think Eddie Howe is the type of manager to allow his squad to do that. I don't think the characters in the dressing room either will want to let themselves get distracted. When we got to the League Cup final a couple of years back, Newcastle were in great form, and then they all of a sudden got to the final and their form really tailed off, which meant when they got to Wembley against Manchester United, they were just down in the dumps. And I think they'll look to learn from that. And I know we're not in the final yet, but I think the same will apply to this semi-final on Tuesday, that Eddie Howe will say the most important thing is the game ahead of you, which is Fulham. And he said that consistently throughout his time here. He only focuses on the game ahead of him, because that's, that sets the tone. If you beat Fulham on Saturday and you beat them comfortably, you go into Wednesday, in high spirits. But if you lose to Fulham on Saturday, it all of a sudden makes 8 p.m. kick-off on Wednesday nervous, despite the 2-0 lead that we've got over Arsenal. So I think he'll be very focused on Saturday against Fulham, and that's what he'll be telling his players. You've got to concentrate on getting the job done, and then you can think ahead to Wednesday's game against Arsenal. So, that'll be the message, I think, within the dressing room. And from a fan's point of view, it's probably a little bit more split. I think if I'm answering the question with my heart, League Cup's like the most important thing. You want to get that first trophy since 1969. You want to get the monkey off your back, and I think once Newcastle win that first cup, more will follow. But also from a business point of view, what's more lucrative? It's the Champions League. That's going to be key to growing Newcastle's revenue and then being able to spend a bit more under these crazy financial rules. So it's finding the balance. But I think under Eddie Howe, he will, like I said, just treat the game that's instantly ahead of him as the most important one.
Yeah, that does make sense, although I think it's not what Fulham fans want to hear ahead of the weekend. We want to hear that all attention is on the midweek game, but yeah, that does make sense. Have you seen any of Fulham this season? Obviously, I assume the reverse fixture, but anything aside from that, is there anything specific that you've picked out from our games, and what have you made of our team this season?
What I've made is that Iwobi suddenly found his feet in the Premier League, and he just looks like the player that I think I always thought he could be. Maybe the player that Arsenal thought they were signing. That's right, he played for Arsenal, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
And everything prior. I think it's been great to see him just find form, because he was one of those players which it always seemed like he got that big move and then it backfired. It didn't quite reach his full potential. But to see him now, especially this season, just absolutely flying, and I'm a big fan. And he's probably the one that worries me the most on Saturday. And I remember thinking back to that game against Fulham in September, him and Traore were just absolutely excellent, and Newcastle couldn't handle them. They just allowed them to roam free, and they took advantage of it. So I'm hoping this time around that Eddie Howe has really nailed it onto not just his fullbacks, but his midfield, to say you cannot give either one of them the space, because they will punish you, as they did back in September. And I'm a big fan of Fulham. I think alongside Bournemouth, I really want them to do well and be one of those teams that break into the established order, so to speak. And it's great to see them having such a good season. And I hope there's a little bit of a blip on Saturday, and then you can start picking up points again. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Fulham, big fan of Marco Silva as well. I like what he's doing there. I think he's a manager who is, he's very good at what he does. Sometimes very underrated. But yeah, and I just enjoy watching them, the way they play. I think they're a good side.
Oh, that's good to hear. And I hope our better season starts on Saturday, unfortunately for you guys. But yeah. So thinking about those strengths for Fulham, and then thinking about your weaknesses this season, obviously I know that you've just been on a pretty incredible run, bar the Bournemouth game, as we've spoken about. Where can we hurt you on Saturday?
It's a really interesting question. I think, first of all, the mentality from Newcastle has to be right, because it's really interesting that when they go up against lower league sides, i.e. those fighting for their lives, they tend to do what is expected of them and win. There's been a couple of examples where they haven't. And then when they go up against the so-called top sides, they also tend to do quite well against them. It's those kind of middle of the road sides which you're not too sure how Newcastle are going to perform. So Bournemouth to a degree, Fulham as we saw in September. Mm-hmm. And it's just all about having that mentality and being switched on. And if Newcastle come with the right attitude, then I think they will beat Fulham. And obviously, as you mentioned at the start of the show, Fulham have lost their last 8, I think it's in James's Park in the Premier League. So it's not a happy hunting ground. But in terms of on the pitch, it kind of depends how Fulham want to play the game. If Fulham want to have the majority of the ball and try and take the game to Newcastle, then that suits Newcastle, because Newcastle will absorb and then hit Fulham on the counter, and that's when they're at the most potent, that's when they're most dangerous, with Gordon and Murphy on the flanks. And if you saw the goals against Southampton, although Southampton weren't, in control of the game, at least one of those goals came from a kind of a counter attack, and that's when Newcastle are at their best. They're just starting to get comfortable with having to be the possession-based side. They're not quite there yet. So I think if Fulham can press high and get in the faces of Newcastle, especially Dan Burn, for example, and basically just copy the blueprint of what Bournemouth did and showed high intensity, didn't give the defence a moment to breathe. That's how you get it in Newcastle, because as good as the likes of Dan Burn has been, if you close him down quickly, he does tend to struggle. And if you can close down his outlet to Lewis Hall, which is where he tends to go at left side, that tends to work in the opposition's favour. But it's really interesting, because as Newcastle transition into this possession-based side, if teams sit off them, they're starting to get punished as well. So it's really down to how Fulham want to approach the game, because I think either way Newcastle can hurt sides. It's just they're better at the moment still when they're on the counter.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. So that's what you think Newcastle's strengths are, really. When they're on the counter-attack, that's when they're really going to be able to hurt Fulham. We haven't got the fastest defenders overall. We've got a few fast players, but not all our backline.
Well, yeah, it's just because when Newcastle can move the ball so quickly, and with Sandro Tonali in that 6, he's really, really good at just sweeping up and then starting the move. And again, his goal that he scored against Southampton, he started the move by winning the ball just inside his own half and then continuing the run, and he got the ball back and he put it in the back of the net. He's going to be the key man on Saturday. His engine's unbelievable. His stamina is just, he's just a joy to watch. And he is the main reason, I would say, alongside Isak, why Newcastle have suddenly got themselves into contention for the Champions League. And if Fulham can somehow stop him, which not many teams have managed to do, then you'll stand a chance on Saturday. But yeah, good luck with that, because he's just been absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I've got to say I've really enjoyed watching Tonali and Isak this season. And Isak's trickery in front of goal is amazing, but I don't think I'll enjoy watching it when it comes up against our team, unfortunately. Yeah. And finally, I'd love to get a score prediction from you for the game. How do you think it's going to go?
Well, I said on our match preview that Newcastle would win, but it was going to be a close game. I still think that. I think I'm going to go for a 2-0 win to Newcastle. But I think we mentioned that stat at the start of the show, and I remember thinking back to the last home game against Fulham, and obviously Jimenez got sent off for a tackle on Sean Longstaff. But even then, Fulham threatened Newcastle, and I know they've got this horrible form at St James's Park, but they're a threat, and Newcastle can't underestimate them. So I think it will be a close game, but I'm going to go for a victory, and I'm going to go for a 2-0 win to Newcastle.
Yeah, I think if I'm going with my head, I kind of agree. I think maybe 2-1. But if I'm going with my heart, I would love to get a draw. That would be a really, really great result for us. It's such a difficult place to go. And also, as you mentioned, our record is poor. I feel like we've had such a calamitous games the last couple of times. Obviously, last year we had a red card with Raul. Year before, Alexander Mitrovic double touched a penalty into the goal. So obviously it was chalked off. Which was, not a player with the best penalty record. We can say that. So I'm just hopeful we're able to turn around our fortunes. But if I'm honest, I'm not feeling too optimistic. I think your prediction is broadly how it's going to end. And before we go, I'd like to ask you about Newcastle. Obviously, a lot of Fulham fans will be travelling up north this weekend. What are your favourite places in the city that people should check out? Places to eat, drink, things to see?
It's a great city. I think it's one of the only footballing cities that nearly every single pub is open to away fans, which is great to see. I think only maybe 2 off the top of my head don't allow away fans in, and that's fantastic that we're such an open city and everyone's so friendly. I mean, the Old George down on the Big Market is a particular favourite of mine, just a good old fashioned pub. one of the oldest pubs in Newcastle, and then just beside that is a burger place called Meat Stack, which is excellent. But you've got the Granger Market, which is the old indoor market in Newcastle, which has loads of really good food places to visit, and then there's loads of pubs. I don't know if you saw the stat recently, but Newcastle were crowned champions of, I don't know how I'd explain it. They were ranked first out of every single club for the amount of pubs in a 1.5 mile radius, and it was something like 170 pubs, something crazy like that. So you will not be short of a good beverage for travelling Fulham fans, and I hope you enjoy. Everyone's dead friendly and just enjoy chatting football. So even if you end up winning, don't be afraid to go out and enjoy it, because Newcastle fans won't begrudge you that win as long as you behave yourself. So yeah, you'll have a great time.
Yeah, that is a stat to be proud of. Most pubs in a 1.5 mile radius. That is something to be proud of. And I can also say I've been to Meat Stack before, and it does do great burgers. So yeah, I can definitely back you up on that one. Thank you so much for coming on and speaking to me, Andrew. It's been so great having you on.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. And thank you for watching the preview. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below, your score predictions, and I will see you soon. Thank you.